Rain has a sound in an empty courtroom that most people never hear. It taps the high windows like fingers that know every secret in the room. That morning, the file on my bench felt heavier than paper should. After 32 years on the bench, I have learned to respect that feeling. If you have ever feared the morning mail, stay with me for a minute. Some days ask a judge for more than rules. Some days ask for memory. Some days ask for mercy. The sky outside was the color of dishwater and old steel. Cold light lay flat across the wood rail and the witness chair. My clerk moved quietly like she did when a room already felt bruised. Even the bailiff kept his voice low that morning. I sat where I always sit, under the seal, under the lights, under the weight. People think a bench gives you distance. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it puts the whole wound right in your hands. The file said the city wanted $54,320, not for theft, not for violence, for a house that had grown too full of need. There were pages of photos, dates, notices, and stamps in bright red ink. The city had a chart. The chart had neat boxes. Neat boxes can hide ugly things. I remember looking at the door before anyone came in. I remember the silence just before the handle turned. You can feel a life enter a room before you see the face. That morning, I felt exhaustion first. Then I saw another name on the city papers and understood the tension. Evan Vail was appearing for the city. His father was Senator Bernard Vail, and half the room knew that before the first word was spoken. Angela Ruiz came in wearing a coat that had lost its shape years earlier. The cuffs were shiny from wear and dark at the edges from rain. Her shoes were clean, but the soles leaned inward with every careful step. She walked like someone used to carrying too much, even with empty hands. Her hair was pinned back in a hurry, still damp near one ear. There was a pale line across her forehead where cheap knit hats had pressed all winter. Her left thumbnail was split low and wrapped with a bandage. Her hands looked scrubbed raw by soap and bleach. She did not look at the crowd first. She looked at the floor, then the chair, then me. People who expect trouble always study the exits before the faces. When she sat down, she kept one hand flat over her stomach. There was a lunchroom smell clinging to her coat. Coffee, disinfectant, a little fryer grease, the smell of jobs done before dawn. Evan Vail entered like the weather had been arranged for him. His suit was charcoal gray and sharp at the shoulders. His hair sat exactly where he wanted it. His smile never reached his eyes, but it sat there anyway. He was young enough to trust paper more than people, young enough to think a clean collar meant a clean conscience. He carried a thin tablet instead of a file. He looked at Angela the way a scanner reads a code. He began with numbers: 5 occupancy violations, 3 safety violations, 2 missed inspections, and a string of daily fines that piled like bricks. He spoke in a voice so smooth it almost sounded kind. The property had exceeded safe limits, he said. The resident had failed to comply, he said. The total amount was justified, he said. I let him finish. I always do. If a person wants to show me the full shape of their thinking, I let them. Mr. Vail sat down, still wearing that small, polished smirk. Then I turned to Angela Ruiz and asked the only thing that mattered first. Who lives in that house with you? She blinked fast, as if the question itself hurt. Then she answered in a voice rough from being awake too long. My son, she said, my father until last month, and my sister's twin boys after the fire on Mason Street. She kept her eyes on my desk when she said the last part. I asked how long the boys had been with her. 4 months and 11 days, she said at once. People remember the length of a burden when they carry it with love. She said her sister was healing in a rehab center across town. That was the first crack in the city story. Illegal occupancy, the papers called it. Family on air mattresses after a fire, I called it. Words matter because they decide who gets blamed. If you are wondering when a rule stops protecting people and starts crushing them, keep listening. That question lives in more courtrooms than you think. And that morning it was sitting right in front of me. It had Angela Ruiz's tired hands. I asked about the front steps in the photos. One board had sunk low in the middle. The rail leaned out like a bad tooth. Mr. Vail had called it clear neglect. Angela looked at the photo for a long second before she answered. She said she had the lumber money in an envelope by the sugar jar. Then her father's oxygen machine broke at 2 a.m. The lumber money bought a rental tank before sunrise. She worked mornings in a school cafeteria and nights cleaning office suites. She slept in pieces, 40 minutes here, an hour there. The steps waited because breathing could not. I asked about the trash bags stacked near the side fence. The city had labeled them hazardous clutter. Angela swallowed and touched the bandage on her thumb. That small motion told me pain lived there. Those bags held used medical pads, tubing wraps, and empty food trays. Her father had lung disease so bad he could not walk 10 steps. The twins had asthma from smoke after the fire. She said she tied each bag herself after midnight. Then I asked about the old pickup in the driveway. Unregistered vehicle, the city called it. Angela's face changed before she spoke. That is when I knew the room was about to get heavier. That truck had belonged to her father. He used it for tile work until his lungs gave out. She could not sell it because he kept begging to sit inside sometimes. He said it still smelled like a strong man's life. I asked about the missed inspection on the date in bold red print. Angela did not answer right away. She looked down at her lap and pressed her fingers together. The whole room seemed to lean toward her. That was the morning my father died, she said. He died in the front room by the window. I was holding the mask to his face when the ambulance came. I never heard anyone knock at the door. Then she said something that made even the court reporters stop for half a breath. When I went outside after they took him, there was a fresh notice taped to the rail. It said I had refused to answer. She still had the tape marks on the wood. No tears came at first. Her mouth just tightened at one corner. That is grief sometimes. Not a flood, but a muscle trying not to break. I looked at Evan Vale. The smirk was still there, smaller now, but still there. He tapped his tablet once and said records showed proper service. Records, he said, as if that settled anything. That was when I stopped hearing this as a city problem. I started hearing it as a truth problem, and truth has a sound when it enters a room. It sounds like paper about to fail. I asked Mr. Vale a simple question, who signed off on the daily penalty increase after the missed inspection. He said his office approved it. I asked whether the hardship request had been reviewed first. He paused for the first time that morning. He said no hardship request appeared in the active file. I asked if he was certain. He said he was. I've spent decades watching people answer too fast. Fast answers often come from habit or fear, sometimes both. I asked my clerk for the intake ledger from that month. While she moved, the side door opened. A courier stepped in, wet from the rain, carrying one thick manila envelope. My clerk said it had just arrived from a city employee who asked for a receipt. I remember the sound when I opened it. Paper sliding over paper, a metal clasp tapping my bench. Evan Vale sat back, still trying to look amused. Inside were copies, not originals, but clean and clear. The first page was Angela's hardship request. It bore the city stamp and the exact date received, 3 weeks before the fines doubled. The second page was an inspection log with time marks. One address checked at 9:12, another at 9:16, Angela's house at 9:19. The houses were 11 blocks apart in morning traffic. The third page was a doorbell camera still from Angela's porch. It showed the inspector at the rail. He never climbed the steps. He never raised a hand to knock. The fourth page stopped the room cold. It was an email chain from Evan Vale's city account. The subject line named Maple Street Redevelopment. His message said, "Move aggressive on holdouts before donor walkthrough Friday. If this story is tightening in your chest, do not look away now." The worst harm often hides behind clean language, and the people who do it count on our boredom. That is how cruelty learns to dress well. There was more. A photo taken by paramedics at 10:03 that morning. The front room curtains were open. A covered body lay on the stretcher inside. Attached to that report was a note from the same inspector. Resident non-responsive, issued refusal notice, recommended maximum schedule. He wrote it while a dead man was still in the house. I handed copies to the clerk and to Mr. Vale. For the first time, his face emptied out. No smile, no polish. Just a young man seeing the floor move beneath him. He said he was enforcing policy. He said redevelopment concerns did not change the violation history. He said the city still had a duty to protect safety. He was reaching for the rule book like a life raft. I leaned forward and spoke as plainly as I could. Safety is not a word you can use after ignoring context. Protection is not what you call pressure on a grieving family, and duty does not mean selecting the poor for speed. I told him rules are tools. A tool can build a ramp. A tool can also break a window. The hand using it decides the truth. Mr. Vale tried once more. He said the house still held too many people. He said broken steps are broken steps. He said feelings could not erase violations. I told him he was right about one thing. A broken step is still broken, but a government that stamps hardship papers, ignores them, and doubles fines is more broken. And that damage spreads farther. The room went so quiet I could hear rain in the gutter outside. I had what I needed. Not because the city had done its job, because one envelope refused to lie for it. I picked up my gavel and let the silence settle first. People think justice lives in noise. It does not. It lives in the breath just before a decision. As to the daily penalties, dismissed, gavel. As to the missed inspection finding, dismissed, gavel. As to the occupancy fines tied to emergency family shelter, dismissed, gavel. As to the safety repairs stayed for 120 days with county assistance ordered today, gavel. As to the conduct of the city office in this matter referred for ethics review, gavel. As to Mr. Vale's email and approval chain, copies go to the Inspector General, gavel. Angela Ruiz did not cry the way movies teach you to expect. She stared at me once as if she had misheard. Then both hands flew to her mouth, but only for a second. After that, she pressed them flat on the table to steady herself. Her shoulders shook once, not again. She bent forward and touched her forehead to her knuckles. When she sat back up, her face looked almost frightened by relief. I asked her to stay where she was for a moment. Then I spoke to her, not the file. Ms. Ruiz, when this room treated you like a problem, you kept acting like a guardian. Do not forget that truth when you leave here. I told my clerk to walk her downstairs after the hearing. There was a county repair grant, a grief counselor, and a school support office for the twins. Sometimes justice needs a phone number attached to it. Angela nodded, but she still looked dazed. That happens when fear leaves too fast. Your body does not trust freedom right away. It waits for the next blow. Then a voice rose from the back row, soft, old, steady. I know that woman, the voice said. We all turned. It was Mrs. Talbot, Angela's next-door neighbor, holding a grocery tote against her coat. She said Angela brought soup to her porch after her hip surgery. She said Angela packed extra lunches for kids who missed breakfast. Then the bailiff cleared his throat and added something I did not expect. He had worked off-duty security at Mason Street after the fire. He remembered Angela carrying 2 boys wrapped in wet blankets. She went back in for a cat before firefighters stopped her. When a room like that sees a person clearly, something shifts. Not in law books, in people. And that matters more than some of us admit. If a stranger once stood up for you when your name was sinking, you remember forever. If no one has, be that person when your turn comes. A life can change in one sentence spoken aloud. I have seen it happen. Angela left that courtroom holding a packet from my clerk and breathing like the air had changed. Evan Vale left through a side door with his jaw tight and his eyes down. Rain still covered the windows. But the room felt warmer than it had all day. 2 weeks later, the hearing was everywhere. Not because court is usually exciting. It is not. Because people know the smell of unfairness when it finally gets opened. And they knew that smell in this story. Our clerk's office received 317 letters in 9 days. 42 held grocery cards tucked inside. 19 came from contractors offering labor. 1 came from a 5th grade class with $14 and a note in blue crayon. A local hardware store delivered railing lumber and porch paint. A church group sent 2 air purifiers and 6 heavy blankets. Someone paid the past due tags on the old pickup. No name on that one. The school where Angela served breakfast started a quiet fund for her family. Parents gave what they could. $7, $23, a pack of socks, a winter coat for one twin and shoes for the other. A retired nurse offered to help sort medical supplies. A roofer patched the leak over the back bedroom for free. A lawyer volunteered to help Angela clear the city record. Kindness arrived in plain clothes. The city could not ignore the noise. 3 inspectors were placed on leave pending review. The hardship system was audited, and Senator Bernard Vale suddenly stopped praising redevelopment in public for a while. Silence can be a confession, too. 6 months passed before I saw Angela Ruiz again. I almost did not know her at first. The coat was gone. So were the bent, apologizing shoulders. She wore a dark blue sweater that fit her properly. Her hair was brushed loose and tucked behind both ears. Her shoes were still simple, but they stood level. She walked straight to the rail without studying the exits. Her hands told me the deepest truth. The split thumbnail had grown out clean. The skin was still rough, but not angry. A silver ring with a tiny green stone rested on her right hand. Small dignity, real dignity. Her face had changed in ways makeup cannot fake. The tightness around her mouth had softened. The skin under her eyes no longer looked gray with broken sleep. And when she smiled, she did not ask permission with it. She had brought the twins with her. One wore a backpack covered in planets. The other carried a shoebox with both hands like it held treasure. They stood close to her, but not from fear. Angela asked if she could speak for just 1 minute. I said yes. Her voice sounded steadier now, lower and warmer. People sound different when panic no longer lives in their throat. She told me the porch had been rebuilt. The railing was solid. The boys had their own room with painted walls and matching lamps from a thrift store. She said the county counselor helped more than she knew how to explain. Then she pointed to the shoebox. Inside was a stack of thank you cards tied with kitchen string, one for the clerk, one for the bailiff, one for Mrs. Talbot, one for me. The top card had tiny stars drawn in blue marker. One twin said the old pickup runs again. The other said they named it Arturo after their grandfather. Angela laughed softly at that. It was the laugh of a person standing in her own life again. She also brought one more thing, a folded photo. In it, the boys sat on the rebuilt porch eating popsicles. Behind them, Angela's sister stood with healed arms and a bright red scarf. Home had returned to that house. Before she left, Angela said something I have carried ever since. She said, I thought the world had decided we were trash on the curb. Then people kept showing up with nails, soup, and stamps. That is a kind of rescue, too. So let me ask you something before I tell you how that day ended for me. When someone near you starts slipping under the weight, do you wait for proof? Or do you bring a hammer, a meal, and 5 honest minutes? What kind of neighbor are you becoming? That evening, after the last hearing, I sat alone in chambers with my shoes off. The building had gone quiet in layers. First the hallway, then the phones, then the last tired copier. I thought about files and how easily they flatten a life. A man becomes a balance due. A woman becomes a violation count. A family becomes a problem address. Paper is useful, but it is hungry. If you let it, paper will eat the weather, the grief, the missed sleep, and the love. It will eat the reason a porch stayed broken. It will eat the sound of boys coughing after smoke. It will eat a dead father still warm in the next room. That is why I still listen for what is missing. Not just what is written, not just what is stamped. What is missing can tell the truth faster than any polished speech. I have seen guilt wear expensive shoes and innocence wear a wet coat. I have seen good people break rules to keep other people alive. I have seen bad people hide behind procedure and call it fairness. The law notices acts, but justice must notice reasons. Some nights I think this job is mostly about interruption. Interrupting fear, interrupting lazy cruelty, interrupting the moment a system forgets it was made by human hands. Human hands can be corrected. I am Judge Judy, and age has not made me softer about lies. It has made me softer about pain. There is a difference. One deserves exposure, the other deserves room. When I turned off the lamp on my desk, the window still held a little rain. The bench was empty, the envelope was gone to evidence, but its lesson stayed behind like a voice in wood. A courtroom is not holy because it has flags and polished floors. It becomes holy only when truth gets treated like a living thing, not a prop, not a schedule, a living thing. And if we forget that, we do not just fail one family. We teach a whole town to stop believing help will come. That kind of damage spreads quietly. It reaches children first. So I locked my door, carried my files, and walked into the dark hall alone. I thought about Angela's rebuilt porch. I thought about those boys naming a truck after the man they missed. I thought about how close any life can come to the curb. Then I remembered why I stayed all these years, not for the robe, not for the bench, for the moment a person is seen whole again. That is the work. Mercy remembers. Mercy.